it has been brought to my attention, shout out to Frankie, that there is a shortage of yeast in the supermarkets. I'm now going to just tell you how you can make your own yeast so that you can continue to carry on baking bread and dough. Let me introduce to you Roberto. Roberto is our very own Monmouth School for Girls sourdough culture. He was created last April, so he is nice and mature. He smells rather pungent. He has a smell rather like nail varnish remover or acetone with a slight undertone of some stale beer. That is a good sign for a sourdough culture. The stinkier the culture, the more hungry he is. He's had multiple offsprings. He's got some babies down in the boys' school because Mr. Chaplin is growing his culture from Roberto, and Mrs. Friend has got a baby Roberto. To make your culture, you need two things. Flour, any type of flour, but preferably a strong flour or a rye flour is really good. And you need a container, a jam jar. I've just got like a glass pot. Day one, 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water, stir, leave in a warm place, such as a utility room. Day two, add another 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water, stir, leave in a warm place. Day three, repeat, 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water. Day four, repeat, 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water. Day five, your culture will probably be ready to use. If it has bubbles in it, then it's lovely and active. It has produced a natural yeast and some friendly bacteria. This is what we make sourdough bread with. The friendly bacteria and the yeast is really, really good for your digestive system. So day five, if your culture is ready to use, you can test it two ways. It should have bubbles in it, or you can take a glass of water and put a teaspoon of your culture in, and if the culture floats to the top, then it is active because it is full of oxygen. To use your culture, say you're going to make a loaf. If you were making a normal loaf that would use 500 grams of flour, what I would do instead is use 400 grams of flour and 100 grams of your culture to replace the normal yeast. Obviously you'll have to use less water in your recipe because the culture is moist itself. He is 1 year old. I have kept him going by feeding him every now and again. If you're going to use your culture regularly, then you need to feed him probably every other day. If you don't need to use your culture very often, you can pop it in the fridge. You can just feed it once every 2 weeks. There's no fixed amount that you need to feed it by, and I normally just keep a very, very small amount of my culture in the fridge, which I call the scrapings, and I just give it about 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water approximately every 2 weeks when I remember. Then when I am ready to use my culture, I take it out of the fridge the day before, I feed it, I let it sleep overnight, and then I feed it again in the morning. One thing that you need to bear in mind with this culture is that the yeast is a much more slow reacting yeast than if you were going to use shop bought. You need to allow it to prove much, much longer. So with regular bread, you would allow it to prove for 1 hour. With this, I would let it prove for a good 8 hours, or I would make your dough up, leave it in the fridge overnight, covered so it doesn't go hard and dry, and then take it out of the fridge in the morning, let it come to room temperature, shape it, and then let it prove to double its size. Happy culture making!